Well, I would say 95% of the population are zombies walking through life, not examining it, which is unfortunate for them, because when you go through a process of self-examination and mindset and all these things that help us grow as adults, grow spiritually and mentally and all that, that's real life, and that's the joy of life.
When we start to sort of make things socially acceptable, and we're doing it with, pot now, and we've been doing this with alcohol for so long.
Oh, yeah.
We start to become blind to the negative effects.
It just broke my heart for what I perceive is people who have less respect for themselves, that will allow themselves to receive scraps rather than the whole thing.
What I was raised with and what I saw gave me a perspective that relationships don't necessarily last.
Right.
And then some of my earlier relationships ended with me being all in and, for lack of a better term, the rug being pulled out.
Welcome to the Epicest. My name is Doug. Happy to have you here. And I have on the show again today once more. You came once before, Steve Avant. And did I say it right?
No, but that's okay.
Well,
You said it the way that it's commonly said, especially in Ottawa, because there's a high French population.
I'm not even French. I don't speak French. Anyways, welcome on. And maybe you could just introduce yourself and what you do and,
So my name's Steve Avant. I work as a lifestyle mindset coach with My Brother's Keeper Coaching, and come from 16 plus years of professional elite level dog training, focused on behavioral modification and basically turning that little puppy into the perfect representation of what it's able to be. And I now focus on doing the same thing with anybody looking to do that in their lives personally.
My Brother's Keeper. I see you've been posting more in the last couple of months, more videos and stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, I try to stay consistent with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're doing it daily, I think, at least, right?
I aim to do it daily.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I saw, I had, last time we met, I didn't watch any of them, but I thought, I should probably watch one or two. So I did. It's not because of you. I just don't have time to watch every video.
Understood.
Anyways, they were interesting. From my perspective, they were sort of a motivational, like.
Yeah, a big part of it is just exposure to people, to show them what I'm doing in my life, what's worked for me to get me to the place that I'm in. Because I've gone through a lot of struggles, and I've found a process that really helps me to, no matter how I wake up, to get myself to where I want to be so I can be my best self throughout the day. And so I show that so that anybody out there that may be struggling with similar things or things of their own can sort of follow along, implement some of these things in their own day to help sort of get them on a good path.
Right. And we've had many discussions around faith, because I'm a follower of Jesus, and that's my day starts at 5 a.m., sometimes earlier, sometimes later, but usually around 5 a.m. and not by choice. That's just when I think God chooses to wake me up, because he knows I'm not distracted. And I just spend some quiet time with God, and then do some scripture reading and doing online Bible studies with a couple of people, and that kind of thing. And that's sort of how I launch my day. And that keeps me on a good path when I'm walking with the Holy Spirit. Sorry, it doesn't keep me on a good path. I go off the path a lot, but it starts my focus right. And then the rest of the day is hopefully I'm coming back to that focus on God. So how would you start your day?
So I wake up at 5 a.m. every morning.
Intentionally.
Yeah.
Like you have an alarm.
I have an alarm. I have a new alarm that I absolutely love. And it's basically a light starts at 4:57, which normally wakes me up within the minute. And if that doesn't do the trick, there's cricket noises that kick in. Because I absolutely hate the sound of alarms.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So yeah, that one's a bit more pleasant. I get up, I do my thing. I go into basically some form of exercise just to get the blood flowing, which is usually push-ups. but at times I do burpees instead.
Like right when you wake up?
I typically shower first. Okay. So I shower, especially being in Canada, I find it just helps loosen all my muscles and get me sort of ready for the day. It's how I prefer to wake up. So I do my shower and then I go into push-ups. And from there, I usually start my day with a protein shake and then reading, journaling, and off to the gym.
Great. Well, that's a good way to start the day. So we've met a few times since we met originally, and it's always a fascinating discussion, and I really enjoy it. And, not topics always that I would pick, but you've sent me a few topics this morning, and I think my response was, well, that'll be fun. So let's go, let's talk about one of them. Do you want me to look at them or do you remember them?
I mean, yeah, you can start it off if you want. You can pick which one.
Well, the first one that you had sent me was very interesting. It was, where is it now? Let me just find it here. Sex trade, prostitution versus human trafficking. And then you had Puffy. I don't know what that meant.
Yeah. So this one is something that came up at an Easter dinner. So Puffy would be Puff Daddy, and he's been in the media a lot lately because he's just been charged with sex trafficking.
He was sex trafficking somebody.
Yeah, exactly.
Or he was using someone who was in the sex trade.
Well, so this is where part of the conversation came up, was that the media sort of just leaves it really vague and doesn't necessarily get into it. It's like they're more so just looking for a story to draw people in,
of course,
to make money. It's more of a business rather than sharing information to help, any purpose. And so during the conversation at the dinner, somebody had sort of expressed that they had taken from this that he was in child sex trafficking, where they were stealing people and selling them and forcing them into the trade. And now I don't know in this case specifically what's been happening, but what I have read is that he had been paying somebody that was in the sex industry, and then he had transported them across state line, which then made him a sex trafficker.
Oh. So this is a person of age of majority.
From my understanding, yes. Okay. Yeah. And I mean, of course, we can get into details that would change the whole trajectory of this. But during this conversation, the person I was talking to, they were sort of shocked to hear that. And so I think the main point of this and why I brought this up was not necessarily about this story specifically, but more so that we tend to go to the worst case scenario when we hear a general term. And the general terms are used very loosely. And so if it's used against somebody without the specifics coming into play, the masses are going to assume the worst of this person. And you can really have a lot of negative effects happening where, even though some people may not agree with what did happen, it might not be to the same extent as the way it's being portrayed.
Well, yeah, that's part of the culture we live in, right, Steve? I mean, we're in a social media culture.
Yeah.
And it's trial by social media, not trial by a judge. And, lives can be ruined through social media. Lives can be ruined through labeling. I actually talked about them. I did a podcast yesterday that will actually be aired before this one, but about labels. We can, as soon as you label somebody something, let's say sex trafficker, or what we do is we put someone in a box. And now I don't need to know this person. I don't need to really know what's going on. I know this is this person, and this is the definition of what it is in my mind. And now I judge this person, and then I can destroy this person because they fit in the box. And it happens in so many movements where they'll label somebody, so that person now becomes evil, whether they are or not, whether anybody knows their story or not. They just become evil because they are this thing.
I couldn't agree more. And I think you touched on something very specific there that I become, really aware of more recently, is that the key part being that everybody's going to judge them, put them in the box of their own development, because every one of those labels is perceived differently by so many people. So it's whatever that individual has the preconceived notion of that label is now how they're seeing that person. So that in itself, I find, is dangerous, because 1,000 people can use the same word, but they can all think of it differently.
Yeah. And the word Christian, by the way. So I'm a Christian, but I people ask me, I tell them I'm I believe in Jesus. I'm a follower of Jesus because that really defines who I am. The word Christian, when I did some mission work down in Colombia, I said, I'm a Christian. And I was with Roman Catholics and they were taken back because there, Christian means Protestant. And Roman Catholic is Roman Catholic and Protestant is Protestant. And, there was a clash between the two. And, this is historical clash. It's not current, but nonetheless, the word Christian means something different in South America than it does in North America, than it does in Europe and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
And it's just a word, right?
Yeah. And so I think that's where getting into the actual story, opposed to just throwing out these labels, is something that we have to get back to, opposed to just having these preconceived notions of somebody, having the conversation, things like this, where we actually get to talk about things and concepts and principles rather than just throwing out labels and sort of leaving it at that.
Yeah. I don't know if that is ever going to be resolved anytime soon. I mean, so social media is open, but it's also highly moderated. Problem is that the problem with free speech, free speech is a great thing, but the problem is either it's free or it's not free. As soon as anybody moderates any free speech, Musk bought Twitter and now calls it X, right? Yeah. And, his thing was it's wide open. Everybody can say anything. And maybe that's a good thing in the sense that it is true free speech, but because as soon as you moderate free speech, it's no longer free speech because who's moderating it? Who gets to decide what's right and wrong? And then it gets moderated by extreme groups or political views or whatever, right? The problem with true free speech is, and especially with social media, is horrific things can be said, like horrific things.
And so I agree, because when they're moderating it, it's going by one group or individual's values and agendas.
Yeah.
And then, so, one way of sort of helping with that would be if everybody online had to have an identification. So there was no longer that unknown factor.
You mean like anonymity?
Yeah. Because as soon as you have that, people can say whatever they want and there's no recourse. Whereas if you were you online, you have to be a bit more aware of what it is that you're saying. And
unless you're nuts, and then you might just say stuff.
But then at least the recourse can come, and there can be that conversation or awareness that this person is just crazy, and you might not have the same vast experience
maybe
of seeing this.
So going back to this Puff Daddy, I don't watch any of that stuff, so this is news to me now. And trafficking versus sex trafficking versus prostitution. So I just started watching the movie Sound of Freedom. I don't know. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
I haven't. So
very
I started
well
watching
done,
it.
Very disturbing movie.
Yes. So about sex trafficking, but of children mostly, I think. So I started watching it with my girlfriend. We're watching it. It's evening. I'm probably like 10, 15 minutes into it. I'm like, I can't watch this right now.
It's a hard one.
I'm not going to bed with these images in my head. Like I will not sleep tonight. I'll have a terrible night. So I haven't gone back to watching it, but I'll do a day watch of that movie. And that's about, of course, child sex trafficking, which is, how would I put this? It's hard for me to fathom.
Oh, it's horrific.
It's hard for me to imagine not only the people taking the kids, which is awful, but the people using the kids,
the
which
whole
is
thing,
awful.
the family losing them, the child themselves, the people abusing them, and the people stealing them.
It's unimaginable.
It really is.
But it's so common.
It's incredible how vast that industry seems to be.
It's disturbing.
It really is.
And then you go to prostitution. So I'm guessing, and tell me if I'm wrong, that you see prostitution as more okay. Obviously, trafficking of children is just not okay. I think that's an across the board.
That's just 100% no.
That's across the board. I think very few people would disagree with that.
Yeah. I mean, I could even go into a whole other conversation that might be a little taboo of, I think that anyone that is firmly found to be guilty of that should, the term that I used to use was be given the blue juice, and the blue juice is how we put dogs to sleep.
Oh, wow.
I think that if you're causing that much pain to other people's lives and you're doing this repetitively, whether it's for experience or for, monetary reward, you simply don't fit into this planet. Like you're going to perpetually cause more damage. And then, studies have shown that the children of these things end up often being repeat offenders themselves, because they've been damaged at such a young foundational point in their life.
I was just talking about that earlier, about the human psychology, how an abused person becomes an abuser, and it's how can that be? You've experienced the worst thing. Well, there's a psychology in that. It's not an intentional act. It becomes like a subconscious act. Like you said, our histories determine what we think, how we, and so it becomes a subconscious almost act of acting out what you experienced. But let's talk about prostitution, because that's interesting. I think we might have different views on that. I have no issue with a prostitute, because that's a human being worthy of love and respect. I do believe that anybody chooses to be in the sex trade, comes from a damaged background. Again, based on historical experiences, based on whatever, maybe based on desperation. When I was in Brazil, there was a lot of prostitutes, and they weren't prostitutes because of maybe damaged backgrounds, but they were so desperately poor that that's a way to raise money, for their families. So, prostitution, some might say, and I've had this discussion with another friend, where that's empowerment. A woman's empowerment is to use her body as she wills, right? And by the definition of empowerment, maybe that's true, but by the definition of how we understand human psychology, it's most certainly, in my opinion, and I'm no expert, comes from a broken place. And so, although I have the power to make a decision, even in my life, whether not even prostitution, I make decisions based on some brokenness from my past. And it's not maybe till later I realize, oh, that wasn't a good decision. I understand why I made the decision now, but I didn't think it through. It is just a reaction to something that's in front of me, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I try not to judge whether it's good or bad, as long as it is an adult making their own conscious decision. But I wouldn't doubt that it does often come down to, a past brokenness or some, damage in the past that's bringing them to that place. But I think, when we're comparing these two,
there's no comparison.
Exactly. And the basis being that this is an adult making an adult decision. And we have situations all across the world where there's people making decisions that aren't really necessarily in their overall favor, but they might be doing it because they need to financially. They might be doing it for whatever reason that it might be. And you see this with, more dangerous labor. People going into those fields because it's going to pay them better and they're going to be able to support their family, like oil rigging. People die doing that all the time, but they still do it and they get paid danger pay doing it because the inherent problems that may arise. Right. But it gives them a profession that they can, bring home money to support the family. And so in cases where the sex trade workers are doing this, of course, there's going to be times where they're doing this for just all the wrong reasons, just layered upon layered,
Well, even strip clubs and, dancers, I've known a few, and there is no question in my mind that the brokenness that came before that led to a decision. It is good money. There's no question, but in the end, nothing good came out of it for them, and other than money, other than being able to make money, there was nothing good in their spirit and their soul that came from that. And that's not a criticism of the person. It's actually having compassion for that person that those things happen to them. There is no man that goes into a strip club. I'll say probably no man that goes into a strip club with good intentions, seeing the spirit of that person. They're not, for them, they are lusting after that body. Yeah. So it is purely a physical taking. There is no giving other than money. Yeah. Right. So that goes to one of your other topics. I'm going to sort of blend that in here because it is monogamy. And that's a topic we've talked about a few times.
We have.
And I'm a reformed monogamous person. So I was monogamous in my marriage, but even in dating, I used to date multiple women and at the same time. And I learned a lesson in previous relationship that even that was damaging, and so I'm now a strong believer that if I'm dating for the purpose of potentially getting married. It doesn't mean this person I'm dating, I'm going to marry, but we're sort of seeking out each other, looking at whether this could potentially be a marriage. And if it's not, then I would end that relationship. And, if the decision is that marriage is not coming from this, I would end that relationship so I don't waste her time and I don't waste my time. But I won't date other women while that's going on. And then when I get married, I just believe that my focus is on the one and only. But if you look at the Bible, guys had multiple wives and they had, sidekicks and whatever, right? So that's not necessarily biblical, but it's just my belief that there is a special gift that we're given when we are with one person and committed in that relationship. And I think it's just special. It's something that can't be defined even,
Yeah. And I think that I've, throughout my life, I've definitely come to that same awareness that there is something almost magical to having that solo connection with another person. And when, often our conversations have been from a different perspective, not necessarily based on my current belief, but just thoughts that have, passed through or previous belief systems that I've, sort of worked through.
And you were challenging because,
exactly.
I'm pretty firm in my position and you were challenging me, which I really appreciate. I like that. Yeah.
Conversation is conversation. Yeah. I think if you're not able to sort of challenge your own beliefs, then, how do you know that you're really that solid in that belief?
Yeah. I think that some of the best lessons I've learned in life are by my very mistakes and earlier and doing things. And then, I was talking to a friend about, his kids using drugs, and he said, well, I'm a recovered addict. I really don't have the right to tell them that they shouldn't use drugs. And I'm like, no, it's actually the opposite.
Totally.
My experience, I'm a recovered drug addict and that's 30 years, but my experience is that, actually from the mistakes I made, I have more authority to talk to you about not using drugs.
And fully aware of the negative that comes along with it.
Yeah. And so I would never do that life again, but I'm very grateful for it because it's given me a great perspective on, for my son, but for others too, that because some people say, well, the legalization of marijuana, for example, I'm going to go off topic here all over the place, but it was a good thing. Well, I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think that, making it socially okay is good for young people, especially because, adults make their adult decisions and if it's not affecting my life, it's none of my damn business. But I do know that it's a gateway drug. And that's not for everybody. Some people could, smoke weed to go get to sleep and calm their mind or whatever. And that's almost a medical use for it. But for many, it's a gateway drug too.
Yeah, most are using it recreationally.
Yeah.
And that's one that, I started smoking weed when I was 12 and smoked on a daily basis up until I was about 40. And I was one of the biggest advocates I'd ever met. It wasn't until that time frame that I pulled it that I still saw the impacts that it had because I was highly functional.
Yeah.
And so nobody could really tell me that it wasn't good. I was so capable of running my life so well from my perspective. But when removing it, I saw that it still allowed me to accept things in my life that I wouldn't have accepted without it. And I do tend to agree that when we start to sort of make things socially acceptable and we're doing it with, pot now and we've been doing this with alcohol for so long.
Oh yeah.
We start to become blind to the negative effects.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a good thing that it was decriminalized because I don't think that people should be going to prison for pot.
I agree with that.
I don't think people should be going to prison for a lot of things they go to prison for nowadays, but having it at every corner store and seeing more pot stores pop up than there are cafes. And, even that we could get into the whole caffeine thing. But I think that is inherently going to be problematic for kids because you're growing up seeing that just like the liquor stores and it becomes just a normal thing in your life where it's not, with exception, for medicinal purposes, I think that there's lots of value to it. But as a recreational thing, it's going to lower your life. You're going to have less quality in your life than you would without it.
So you had said you were using weed and you felt like you were functional. You have a different view now. And I have probably a similar view because we know that THC stores in fat cells, and for a long time. It's not like next day I'm clean of it.
No, it's
like
months.
Yeah, it's months. So if you continue to use weed and you continue, it accumulates because half-life just basically means this is a period of time it takes for half of it to leave your system, right? And so you actually accumulate and it just stays, and so you remain in a state that seems normal. And so I'm assuming when you stopped, you were able to look back and go, oh, I was less productive than I am now.
100%.
Yeah.
You know, and in it, like being in any fog, you can only see so far. So, you know, you feel normal because you are normal compared to what you can compare it to. Once you remove that and you have more clarity, you can actually see, even if it's just percentages, you know, I might have still been 80% functional.
Yeah.
But that other 20% or even 10%, even 5%, when you're reaching for something great, something better, that's a huge difference, you know? So
I think that applies even to, again, I told you this, we're going to go down rabbit holes. Our physical being, you know, and how we take care of our bodies.
Definitely.
If I'm eating poorly, and that's what I've done for a decade or decades, this is my norm. You know, I wake up, I got sore this, I'm a little bit that. But that's my norm. And I don't stop to think, oh, you know, I have nothing to compare it to. As soon as I start eating clean and healthy and I feel great and I look back, go, oh, that norm was terrible. Yeah. Like, I don't want to go back to that norm. Exactly. I kind of like the new norm I have, and maybe I want to actually improve that norm. And the same would apply to weed.
And that's exactly it. And then if you're eating, you know, that bad food 10% of the time, you're going to notice it come back every time that you're eating it. And so then the cleaner you get and you're striving for that 100% is where you really get that full awareness of how much better your life becomes. And that is clear across the board.
So I'm going to talk about diet now because
diet's always worth talking about.
I'm mostly carnivore now.
Yeah.
And I do extremely well on carnivore. Like, I feel great on carnivore. And my cheat day is Sunday, and my cheat day is a keto day. And I actually notice a difference even then because I'm more bloated and like there's just, and I wake up the next day not feeling as good as I did the Saturday. But I just like to break the monotony of carnivore because carnivore is actually very difficult, I find, because, you know, I want to have a snack. The last thing I want is meat, you know, but there it is. Right. But even that, I see the comparison of my keto day compared to my 6 carnivore days.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think any restrictive diet is going to be hard.
Yeah.
And I think there's different paths to sort of the same result.
Yeah.
But the more I look into it, the more the carnivore diet does seem to be the natural human diet. And this is why we're seeing so many people transfer to that and get the results that they're getting health-wise. And a lot of times it's
my girlfriend tried it for a day.
Okay.
So we were going to do it for Lent. We were just going to go like pure, you know, when I say meat, I mean, if it flies or swims or walks, then we could eat it. Not humans, just 4-legged. Well, chickens, I guess they walk too, right? But so we were going to do that for Lent. So basically doing the opposite of what a Catholic might do or Orthodox, which would be go vegetarian. We went like full meat. Well, she lasted a day. She just couldn't do it. I went the full 40 days and it was great. It was very spiritually challenging and there were other things, but from a physical point of view, it was great for me. For her, it was terrible.
In what sense?
Well, I don't know. She was just, she couldn't get satisfied. You know, I don't think she gave enough time, but I'm not convinced that there's a one diet fits all kind of thing. You know, I think that everybody reacts differently to things. And
so that is possible. I think that foundationally we are pretty damn similar. I feel there's going to be more of a difference to male and female versus the average when we follow the, you know, consistency in males and females separately. And so I think also being that she only tried for one day, you have so much stored in your system, right back to, like, you know, we're touching on the pot, how it stores in our fat cells. The same thing is happening with a lot of other things. Your macronutrients, your micronutrients, and your hormones are all sort of in tune to what you've been putting your body through.
Yeah.
And so for her to get a really good sense of if that diet is good for her, you really need to be doing at least 30 days to have more of a flush happening.
Yeah.
And a lot of people go through basically a flu because their body's, flushing out a lot of the toxins and
switching
and adjusting
from glucose to fat.
Yeah, because I think that's a big one too, is that we basically function on either sugar or fat.
Yeah.
And in our society, we just keep jamming both into our system nonstop. And this would be like putting gas and diesel in a car. I mean, it's not going to work well.
No.
And then we wonder why our bodies are breaking down. Well, we're just flooding them with food nonstop, and typically hyper processed foods on top of it that aren't even necessarily recognized in our system as food, period. But even if you're eating a cleaner diet, continuously putting high levels of fat and carbs into our system, I think it just overloads it.
Yeah. Well, I do extremely well on the carnivore, but I'm now now that Lent is over, I did it for, spiritual reasons. And it actually had I was under a heavy attack by the devil for my poor girlfriend. She was watching me go through some mental hoops, but it was good. I know that when I'm going through those challenges, actually, it means I'm on a good path, because the last thing the devil wants is for me to get closer to God.
Yeah, you'd have no interest in it if you're already all the way in his corner.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was a spiritual, but now I'm going to actually continue on and mostly do carnivore. By the way, I'm very good at, and I'm told this, and I never really thought about it, but it's true. I'm very good at just turning off food. Like, okay, I'm not going to eat this. I just decide not to eat it, and I'm fine. And it's a decision in my head. It's like an on-off switch, and I don't think that's common for people, because
people struggle with food a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of emotional attachment to food, and there's a lot of well, if I'm sad, I eat, and comfort. There's fatty or sugar, right? And both of them satisfy moods, right?
Yeah, trigger endorphin release. They make us feel happy in a very short-term sense.
Yeah.
And often, depending on the relationship that's been developed, you're seeking comfort from it.
Yeah.
Not nutritional. The purpose isn't really in line with what it's supposed to be.
And I'm aware of that, because when I was on this carnivore, like strictly carnivore, when I was feeling, so I was under attack, and when I was feeling off, anxious or whatever, I'm like, oh, I could really use a sweet right now. That's my brain goes there. I haven't had sweets in years, but that's where my brain went. Oh, sweets would be good. It's like, well, yeah, where'd that come from?
Just like any other drug.
That's right.
Pops up at our lowest point.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So going back to the norm, what is the norm, whether it be smoking pot so you went through this phase where you're smoking pot, then you made a conscious decision to stop?
Yeah, that was a very conscious decision, because ultimately it's one that, when I look at alcohol and a lot of the other drugs that I've used in my past, I have more negative viewpoints on them. I don't see them as being the positive that anyone else sees. Especially when it comes to alcohol. I mean, when you're talking about cocaine, most people don't think cocaine's a good thing.
Right. But
then you switch the conversation to alcohol, which is really, in my opinion, just as destructive, if not more so. And all of a sudden you have people really fighting back.
Yeah.
And
well, because I might have a glass, I mean, I don't drink, but I might have a glass of wine at dinner.
Exactly.
And that's the extent of it. And I guess some studies show that red wine once a day is
Some studies
good.
Show almost anything that they want to prove.
Well, we talked about that earlier, about statistics, right?
Whereas when it comes to pot, I do see more benefit from the, I don't even like really calling it a drug, but from the plant. And again, once a lot of this does come back to sort of the medicinal rather than recreational. But when I made the decision that I wanted to start working on my life and improving it beyond where it was, that was one of the things that had to go. And ultimately, especially reflecting back on it, it was definitely an excellent decision.
Yeah. So do you preach now? Like, would you preach that to people? Because you do this coaching.
Happily, yes.
And if you have a client who smokes weed, more recreational than medicinal,
100%.
You would talk to them about that.
100%. I mean, I try to talk about everything that I've experienced as openly as possible.
Right.
Because if there's one thing that can influence somebody else's life in a positive manner, I look at it as that's really like my duty being here. That's my path.
Your story. Your story, a person's stories can be a very powerful thing.
100%. I mean, it's the only thing that enables other people to learn without having to experience themselves. And as humans, we tend to want to experience it anyways. We have a hard time taking other people's lessons as our own. But some people do. And then other people may already be there and they just need that little bit of awareness, that little trigger, that little light for them to see, oh yeah, okay, I can see that. And it can be just that little nudge that gets them over that hill and starts them on that new path.
Yeah, I saw that actually in the last podcast that's being aired now on addictions, was one of the comments was, oh, I really want to give this a try. So maybe they've been thinking about it for a long time. And then you hear someone's stories, it was an interview with my nephew and his addiction story. And I threw some of mine in there too. But it's like, oh, I want to,
Our conscious is constantly screaming at us the things that we need to do.
Yeah.
So it's not like when you talk about something and you're telling somebody what would make their life better, they already know it. They already know each and everything in their life that should be removed. But they're stuck in their path and they hold on to it for one reason or another. They adhere to that story. It becomes part of them. But that exposure can often just be enough of that pressure for it to cause that effect of, yeah, let's try this.
Yeah.
This is the time.
So let's go back to the monogamy thing. Okay. I'm all over the place.
Yeah, we jumped.
You're going to have to cut this up really good, James, because it's a life lesson, right? So,
all right. So the conversation that we had before in monogamy, I'll just dive right into this.
Before that.
Okay, you got something
before
specific.
That is because you were saying, I can rationalize. And I could rationalize. We're all adults. They all know I'm dating other girls. It's all fine.
Okay.
And, my life lesson that I learned is, yes, but I'm affecting their spirits. I'm affecting that person and negatively. And whether they're adult or not, I have a responsibility to make a choice for that person and for myself.
Sure.
Right? And so my new path is it's one woman only. And it may not end in marriage, but it may. And
but the intention's there.
The intention's there.
Yeah.
And then I won't have a side woman. I'll go to the next woman if that's the case, right?
So I think there could always be exceptions because there always are. When I was younger, I came to the conclusion that if there's a bisexual partner, for example, then there's a good chance that you could welcome in another party because...
That's where we started, right?
I think it is. Because if the male likes other men or the female likes other women, you can potentially add in another partner and everyone could theoretically be happy together. And there isn't the need to leave the relationship if you fall in love with the other person. And I've always sort of seen that if you have two straight people and one falls in love with somebody else, you have a conflict here. You can't have love for two people in a separate relationship and actually continue that in a good path. The first person's going to be hurt by it, and so is the second. You're just going to hurt everybody involved.
So I was standing in line somewhere, I'm not going to say where, and I was listening to this young guy talk about his polyamorous.
Okay, yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's one.
It's a term that I wasn't really familiar with, but polyamorous. So he was married apparently, and he's with his girlfriend, and he's kind of bragging to someone else in this lineup how great this polyamorous relationship is. I got a girlfriend, I got another girlfriend, and I got my wife, and everybody's good, and she's seeing other people. And really, for me, it seems so horrific. It just broke my heart for what I perceive.
Yeah.
And this is just my perception, is people who have less respect for themselves, that will allow themselves to receive scraps rather than the whole thing, And I believe, again, it'll come from a historical experience, whatever, how you were raised or experiences in your life where I don't deserve the whole thing. And I believe that I have come to learn, Steve, over the years, and only recently, I deserve the whole thing from one person. I deserve it all. I want all of them, and I want to give them all of me. And I won't accept scraps. But I think that is accepting scraps.
Yeah, I do tend to agree.
Yeah.
And especially when I hear that. And so I try to stay open-minded to most things because...
By the way, I'm not very open-minded.
I know how I feel about things. And if somebody else feels fundamentally different in a different path, I don't feel I'm the one that should be judging them. And so that can get right into like the whole transgendered topic. You know, I know that's another one that people have a hard time coming to grips with. I don't know if we're going to jump down a different rabbit hole
Not
here,
even
but
there. No, I won't go there.
We can maybe save that for our third
I
one.
get myself in trouble in a lot of places. That's not when I'm going to go.
But basically, I do agree that there is something of higher value when you find that one person and you can commit to each other in that way. And I tend to agree that the vast majority of people that would accept anything less are coming from a place where they feel like they're worth less.
Yeah. By the way, I come from a place where I felt worth less, you know, and that I was not worthy of that full love. And it's only recently, having come through a very difficult relationship, where I gave my full love, but I didn't get full love. And it was actually that relationship that broke something in me in a good way. It was like I was able to reflect on every serious relationship I had ever had, even the not serious ones, but the serious relationships. And in every case, I accepted less than full love. And it wasn't the other person's fault. It was me. It was what I was willing to take, you know, and I would take the scraps or I would take half or whatever, you know, and now I'm in a place where I deserve it all, you know, and I want to give it all.
Yeah, that's a common thing. We accept what it is that we think we're worth.
Yeah.
I think for myself, a lot of my previous issues in relationships came down to the fear that I would lose them anyhow.
Right. Yes.
So, you know, if nothing's permanent, then why am I putting my 100% in?
Right.
I might as well experience my life and enjoy it for what it is.
But I think as a man, because we can all be men.
Yeah.
We can be boys in men's bodies.
Yeah.
But as a real man, to give fully my heart to somebody, and you learn this when you have children, by the way, because you give fully your heart to your children, and well, it's not true that you get nothing in return, but they're really not doing much for you.
It's a delayed gratification for sure, though.
Yeah.
You might get a lot later in life. But.
Well, I get a lot. Like raising my son has been one of the best gifts of my life, you know, and there's no burden that came with that. It was all joy, but to give my heart to a woman, so it's different, right? Because I'm choosing a person.
Yes.
And that woman can step on that heart and, you know, do a dance on it and really hurt it. Yep. And I'll say I've experienced that. And the interesting thing is I came out wanting to love even more because the gift wasn't what I got. It was what I was able to give. And I think that makes me more of a man when I can give my heart again, and even more so because I'm so blessed by that. It's just, it excites me to give my heart.
I like that a lot. The act of giving is something that's such a blessing in itself.
Yeah.
And so I guess my initial perspective, to jump back to that, was when I assessed it, I had looked at it and seen that a monogamous relationship is more inherently in line with what women naturally want.
Right.
At their core. Yeah. And I didn't feel, or I still haven't seen, but we'll get, you know, this will sort of come full circle. What it was that they had to sacrifice in order to be in this, because they typically do want a single partner. They're out there looking for love, security, and sort of that comfort. Whereas men at our core, and, you know, speaking of this in a more of a physical manner, we're supposed to be out there spreading our seed. And we see this throughout much of nature. So I looked at it that men have to sacrifice that inherent desire in order to be in a healthy monogamous relationship. And when I took this one step further, I did recognize that what women sacrifice is basically to procreate, to provide us with those children.
Right.
This is what brings that value full circle in the relationship. And without that, then, the perspective was that the man is sacrificing something of his true self that the woman is not. But then I looked at the Bible. And if we look at the Bible, even, if you're not a believer and you just look at it as a textbook, it is inherently a very good instruction manual on how to be a proper human. And then if we take one step into that, it's pretty hard to argue that Jesus would then be basically the epitome of what a good man can be.
Yes.
And if we look at the fact that he sacrificed his life, which would be the ultimate sacrifice, to show his love and to give the rest of humankind this blessing of, relieving us of our sins. If that is the epitome of what a man should be, then I believe it's a really easy transition to make, that in order for you to become a true man and show how much you love your partner, you can sacrifice that one physical need.
Right. I'm with you 100%, Steve. That's changed a lot from our discussions of previous days, which is great. I actually liked when we disagreed too, just because it challenged me. And, I would leave a discussion and I would have to go off and, okay, thinking about what Steve said. And
I will point out that often the comments and the topics that I bring up are not necessarily my own, but just some that I've thought of, and that I sort of allows me to have that open-minded grace for others.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm probably less open-minded and less gracious, but, I'm self-admitted that. I love what you said. When there's discord between me and my partner, the call is to still love, right? And so love comes in various forms, right? The agape love, the God's love, is commitment and what's the word? Fortitude, and keep going forward. And, and then there's the in love part, and I'm not in love with my partner when we're fighting. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of annoyed with my partner.
Fair enough, yes.
Maybe I even dislike them in a moment.
Yeah.
But the agape love says you still serve, you still give, you still do all these things. I guarantee you, Jesus didn't feel good being beaten and then, whipped and then nailed to a cross.
No.
But you give, hopefully not to the point of death, because there's a blessing in that too. I learned it with my son. There was a point in a previous relationship where I felt God saying to me, if you can give so freely to your son and get such joy of it, why can't you do that with a woman? Mm-hmm. And the reason is fear, right? My son could hurt me, but he's, we got it pretty good, and he's pretty awesome. But, the woman I choose can really hurt me. And so there's a fear in that. If I give myself completely to this person, what are they going to do with it? There's vulnerability in that. Like, what are they going to do with my heart that I just gave them?
Yeah.
Right?
There's a lot of vulnerability in that. But, a lot of the beauty in life comes from being vulnerable.
It does, but it doesn't feel good in moments. So,
it can be really hard.
I've been in, I won't say which one, but I've been in an extremely painful relationship where my heart was really handed to me with this, it was, run through a cheese grater. And, I'm still so grateful for that time. And I'm still so grateful that not only did I come out, there was some mending to do, but came out of it just wanting to give it again, but even more if I can give it more and completely and be 100% vulnerable. And, who knows? You had mentioned, one of the things was you were afraid that the rug would, you didn't use this term, but the rug would be pulled from you. Like, well, it's not going to work anyways. And I'm going to get hurt anyways, right?
Yeah. And this was sort of from past experience, both in relationships and sort of familial.
Yeah.
What I was raised with and what I saw gave me a perspective that relationships don't necessarily last.
Right.
And then some of my earlier relationships, intimate ones with girlfriends, ended with pain, ended with me being all in and, for lack of a better term, the rug being pulled out. Yeah. And it does hurt, and you feel blindsided. And so the initial is, well, why am I going to do that again? Why am I going to put my whole self into something that this person may not even value, appreciate, or love me in return? But of course, once you heal through that and you form the gratitude and appreciation for the lessons that you learned, you see that because that's what's going to give you that full love and experience of life. And I think that love is one of the most precious things that we get to experience in this life. And so to hide from it is really to hide from one of the most valuable experiences in this physical form that we get.
Yeah. I tell you, it's the best. I'm grateful for life experiences, and I probably lived a similar life to you. I think much of my breakups were self-fulfilling prophecies as well, you know.
I could say that too.
Not my last relationship, maybe, but definitely most of my relationships, I would create a situation where I believed it was going to end. And I think this is part of your coaching, right? A lot of it is mindset, right? And so if my mindset is it's going to end, somehow I'm going to create an end. You
Definitely.
know? Or create situations where the person has no choice but to leave.
Yeah.
Or, right? And so I proved to myself, you see, they do end. You know?
Yeah, and we can do this in both the positive and the negative in life.
Yes.
If you believe something enough and you push towards it, you will achieve that goal. And I agree. I went through a lot of that myself with my relationships. You know, if you drink enough and you stay out late enough and you fight about it enough, you're going to push somebody away. You know? I mean, how much crap is somebody going to take from you?
Yeah.
And then, there's that flip side of that coin. Whereas if you believe that it'll work and you love hard enough and you fight hard enough for the relationship and you become selfless enough that you're not just making ego-based reactions, but instead you're responding from a place of compassion and understanding and working towards coming back to the table when there is conflict and growing through it, well, all of a sudden things start lasting, and you can see the development that comes from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, my last relationship I ended because it wasn't that I wasn't getting. I mean, it was worse than that. But, I had to make a decision to leave for my own health and well-being. But I'm grateful for that relationship too, because it taught me so much. And the relationship I'm in now, well, I feel bad for her because my mind is still not quite, I'm sure. Going through these thoughts of, this is not going to work because I just don't have it, and it's not because I'm not worthy at this point. It's because my brain is sort of readjusting from trauma, really. And I actually went to a point where I said, I don't know that I'm a good boyfriend. Like, I don't know that, that I should be doing this. And she made a really good comment. She says, well, if I love you and you love me and I give up because we're going through a difficult time, what kind of relationship is that, Yeah. And I'm like, fair enough, So, but to give, I think a lot of us get into relationships saying, what am I going to get out of the relationship? Yeah. And really, I've learned that I need to go into the relationship as, what am I going to give in this relationship? What do I have to offer? What am I bringing to the table?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And that's where I think so much of life is really about developing yourself to be the best person you can be. So that when you get into that relationship, it is about, you're an offering. You're bringing somebody to the table that is of value. And you're trying to be the best man that you can be. And if you are being that, then your partner is blessed to be with you. And if they're doing the same thing, then you're blessed to have them in your life. Yeah. And when you work together like that, it's a power couple. The things that you can overcome, the things that you can develop and create is it's exceptional. If you have two people that are both running out of 10 and you put them together, you don't get 20. No, you get a magnification of it. Yeah. Exactly.
And, you're going to go through difficult times. So my girl and I have gone through a few nothing major, but, challenging times. And like I said, during Lent, my brain was under attack, and but we talked it through, and what we're learning is we just talk it through, and that actually strengthens us, and it makes that multiple even more. That we can go through the challenges, acknowledge they were challenging, and sort of come to solutions together.
Yeah, and me and my partner, we've had our fair share of conflict. Yeah, I'd say that I've had more conflict in this relationship than any other one I've been in. But we keep coming back to the table and we keep growing through it. Yeah. And we keep showing up for each other. And, that really builds a lot of trust and love and respect for one another. And there's still times where, you know, if you're at a low point and something triggers off, like, you can react.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it's seeing it, it's catching it, it's reeling it back in, and it's owning it and coming back, you know, repairing and apologizing, taking accountability for what it is that you just did.
Absolutely. Taking accountability.
Yeah.
That's true growth. And that's very vulnerable, saying, you know, not because you did this, I did this. That's not a true apology.
No.
I had this reaction inside and I reacted this way outside, and I'm sorry for that.
Yeah.
You know, it's an inward look, an outward response that you're taking responsibility for. I've had apologies where, well, if you didn't do this and that, but I'm sorry that I did it. I'm like, no, that's not an apology. That's not an apology.
That's an excuse.
Yeah, that's right. And it's putting it out there on the other person and then saying, well, but I'm sorry you feel that way, or I'm sorry.
It's a cause and effect excuse. I mean, it's not the same thing as, you know, because even though your partner may have said something that triggered something, that's something that got triggered is your damage inside of you.
Oh, yeah.
So when I'm coming back and apologizing, they may have their own apology to make too.
Yeah.
But I'm apologizing for my part in it because I saw, shit, I just got triggered because of some trauma I have buried inside of me. I have work to do, and I'm sorry for how I reacted. And so, you know, it's got nothing to do with that person at that moment.
That's right. I've learned to mostly. So when there's a reaction, I take it inside. My girlfriend will notice a change in my mood, but I don't take it outside. I take it inside and I start processing. And I'm like, okay, what the hell's going on? Why am I even thinking this stuff? What's going on in my mind? You know, and then it could take me minutes, but it could take me hours. Could take me a couple of days.
Sure. To
really come to the root of is my mind reacting this way? And I do that so that I don't react outwardly, you know, and
processing and reflecting.
Yeah. And then I'll go back to her and say, well, this is what was going on in me. And, you know, this is the struggle I had. And it could be, well, when you said this, I reacted this way. And, you know, I still take responsibility for my side of it. But it can be attached to something she said or did, right? Yeah. But it's not her fault. It's just, you know, that. And there's so much growth in that.
Yeah.
It's so amazing.
It is. And it feels good, you know, whereas if you just bury it, blame it on them and walk away, you'll feel like crap inside.
Oh, yeah.
Because you know the part that you had to play.
And
even
you'll
if
never
you're hiding
anything
from it. No,
you'll never grow.
Yeah.
True growth comes from inner acknowledgement. So going back to your coaching, you know, my brother's keeper, where a lot of it is mindset, right? Is that's a mindset that I think 100%. Is so essential for growth.
Yeah, getting away from that victimhood mindset where everything's happening to us and it's everybody else's fault, and really becoming accountable for the things that we have to play a role in it.
Absolutely.
Because really, no matter what happens, you have the decision to either blame others or look for your part, which strengthens you.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter how small your part was. We always have a role to play. And if we can own it, we can learn from it, we can grow from it, and we actually become better. But
so I would say that that's true, absolutely. And you may or may not agree with this, but I think we've developed a culture, at least in North America, I don't know about the rest of the world, where the woman is always the victim, and where it always happens to them, and ownership of mistakes is very challenging because, you know, there was the time when, you know, it was a male-dominated society, and, you know, a woman could tell someone I'm being abused, and they'd be like, what did you do? Right? It's gone the other direction now. You know, what did Bill Burr say? You believe women, all of them, like all their stories are absolute. Yeah. I think we've sort of created this almost, victimhood culture for women where really they're always the victim and the man's always the perpetrator. And well, obviously that's not true. There's probably 50-50 of that, but
yeah, I think most of what we see in society is that we tend to go from one side of the spectrum and then we pendulum swing all the way to the other.
Yeah.
We don't like to find a good spot in the middle. And the reality is that unfortunately, in history, I think that women were victimized a lot.
Yes, they were men. For sure. Yeah.
And a big part of that being that, they're the fairer sex. Like, we have physical dominance over them. And so we were able to do it. And then if simultaneously you're running the society, I mean, it puts them at a major disadvantage.
Absolutely. And then we swung, and I think men are afraid of women now.
Yeah,
I'm afraid of women.
Often. I just saw a comment this morning on Facebook where it was basically a group of men just expressing that they could never make the first move on a woman because they will either be attacked, backlashed, or they're actually worried about charges coming forward. Yeah. And I mean, I think that there's, a middle ground on that too, that you really have to look at yourself and was it appropriate how you came forward and approached them? Are you realistic in your, presentation versus the person that you're approaching? Was the situation acceptable? But at the same time, I think it also comes down to often women are just lashing out because they've been told that they're the victim and they're looking for that.
Yeah. So in your relationship, I'm not going to ask you specifically about your relationship. In my relationship, I find it less challenging, but I have been in situations where that was extremely challenging, where apparently I was the one who needed fixing and the other person was perfect, right? And I think that's a really unhealthy place to be. It is important that I take responsibility for my actions. That's what makes me a man, is to own my stuff and work on fixing it and walk a good walk. And, I'm part of men's groups, so that helps me even walk a better walk because they don't let me off the hook, and they call me out, but they also support me. And I think that's important for women too, but in my relationship, we're able to talk through things and, it's nice once in a while to get an apology from a woman, it's like, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's essential that everyone in a relationship recognize that they have growth to do.
Yeah.
Because if one person thinks it's all in the other person, well, that first person's probably not a very good partner.
No.
Because we all have areas that have been damaged. We all have areas that we can grow in. And, getting an apology for something that's happened that the other person overstepped on or reacted poorly is always good because it brings us back to a neutral state and shows that they actually care, respect, and love you.
Yes.
If they're just looking to put blame on you, then it's just coming from ego and they're just self-absorbed and focused on self. And what kind of relationship is that if the other person is just focused on themselves?
Absolutely. So going back, I want to talk about my brother's keeper, your coaching and stuff. Because that's mindset. These are all mindsets too. Mindset of accountability. Mindset of,
being
whatever.
Selfless, focusing on others. Yeah. Being that gift to others, opposed to just focusing on yourself.
So how do you incorporate all of those? Because those are really important and profound beliefs. How do you incorporate those into your coaching?
So it's a whole sequence. And when I say that it's lifestyle and mindset, it's because those two things basically encapsulate everything in life. If we can work on fixing your lifestyle, that includes your wake up time, your food, your exercise, what are you doing in your day? And then on the flip side, so that's the external stuff, right. Outside. And then the inside is all mindset. And when you can put those together, then you can really excel. When it comes to developing the mindset, a lot of this is conversation. It's exposing people to new ways of thinking. It's dealing with them when they are going through struggles and not just letting them off the hook. It's going back to what you were just saying about your people at your men's group. Calling them out on the things that they need to be called out on, and then supporting them when they need that too.
Sure.
And this really comes down to the exact same thing I was doing with dogs, except with dogs, it's very black and white. So it's easy to see.
Right.
You tell them to do something, they don't do it, there's a correction. When they do it, there's praise. So it's very black and white. So when it comes to people, and you see this a lot with kids, if they're throwing a temper tantrum and their energy is spiking, I need to cap it. Because if they're allowed to just keep going up, they're going to red zone and it's just chaos. And they're going to learn this as a tool and they're going to use this into their adulthood, which as, somebody who's responsible for a child, it's your job to get them to develop so that they will function outside, and people are going to like them when they're older. So you basically have to cap it, but when you cap it, their energy is going to start going down, and you can't let them hit the ground. You need to catch them. So it's almost like you're balancing this ball in this median range of positivity and development. And so when it comes to people, it's the same thing, or I should say when it comes to adults, it's the same thing, where when their behavior is uncalled for or negative or destructive, they have to be called out on it. And as soon as they need the support, you have to be there on that end too.
Right.
And so it's a lot of it is exposure and basically sharing.
But you, mostly men, I would imagine, but you find that people listen when you call them up? Because
I definitely work with women too, and I get very good results with the women that come forward and I'll ultimately say yes, people tend to listen. Now, whether they implement it into their lives thoroughly to the level that they need to, sometimes that takes time. But usually by the time they come to work with me, they have the intention. They want it. They're aware on some level that they want it.
So they're a little more open to it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not just walking up to the random person on the street and just calling them out for everything and then hoping that they're actually going to take to it well. No, I mean, the reality is that a lot of people that are walking on the street probably need that. And if they were slightly open to it, they might actually learn something that day.
Well, I would say 95% of the population are zombies walking through life and not examining it, and, which is unfortunate for them, because when you go through a process of self-examination and mindset and all these things that help us grow as adults, grow spiritually and mentally and all that, that's real life, and that's the joy of life.
It gets so much better.
And it's hard as hell sometimes, but it's so good. And to be just living your life and never examining it, and born, do whatever you do and die. And this unexamined life is such a shame.
Yeah, like a conveyor belt lifestyle.
Yeah. And I think that's the majority of people.
It is, unfortunately.
I'm blessed to be a recovered addict. So when I got clean, I had to really face my life. Yeah. It was that or die,
Yeah.
So, I was forced into this, a good force, but, forced into examining my life. And that's the 12 steps, right? The 12 steps are an examination of my life. And, I've continued to do those steps in different forms going forward. But not everybody's put in that position where they have to face their lives.
Yeah, they haven't hit a low enough point where they don't have a choice.
But you're saying that got people who come to you are probably not quite there, but they're open enough they might listen.
Yeah, they're there to one degree or another.
Yeah.
And so I take it as basically like a dharma of mine. It's a duty that I just keep sharing what it is that, I've gone through and what it is that I've done to get me to where I'm at and the positives that go along with it. Because I feel like if you keep exposing people to things, once you're exposed to it, you can't shake it. It's in there. You now know this. And so it might take a while for that seed to grow, but if I keep sprinkling the seeds, they are going to grow at some point. At least the odds are really good.
Or they'll just take a sharp turn and walk away.
That's possible. But if that seed is still implanted in their mind, I might not be there when it grows. Yeah, it could be 20 years down the road, but it's in there.
Well, that's my faith story, actually. The seed was planted. Yeah. And after the seed was planted, I became a drug dealer. And, and so if you were looking from the outside, you go, oh, this guy got way worse. But there was something going on in me that when I got clean, I started walking with the Lord. But, and the person who planted the seed, he was still in my life, but he didn't know that he was the one who planted the seed.
Sure.
Right. And so, that seed grew and he didn't even know it was growing.
And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
If I just keep sprinkling seeds, I don't have to be there for it.
No. The results aren't as important, I think, as doing the right thing and planting the seeds. We kind of have to wrap up, Steve, but I really enjoyed this conversation. And,
likewise.
I didn't know where I was going to go. Could have gone many places, but I think it was very good. We covered a lot of great topics. So again, I thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And if you like this channel, subscribe and like it and do all those things that help us keep going.